Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning into this webcast featuring Project SEARCH. I'm your host, Ann Williams. I'm based at CEDL in Austin, Texas, and work on the Vocational Rehabilitation Service Models for Individuals with ASD project. This project is funded by the National Institute on Disability and Rehabilitation Research, or NIDR. Annually, this project identifies effective employment programs for people with ASD. In 2012, our National Advisory Panel found Project SEARCH as an effective program. Our project focused on the 2 ASD-specific Project SEARCH sites for inclusion into our effective program categorization. Project SEARCH is a 1-year school-to-work program for young people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, including ASD. The innovative workforce and career development model benefits the individual, the workplace, and the community. We'll hear about Project SEARCH model and how the New York Collaborates for Autism has adapted this model specifically for people with ASD. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenters. Erin Riley is a recognized authority and national leader in promoting employment opportunities for people with disabilities and other barriers to employment. She is a founder and senior director of Project SEARCH, an employment and transition program that has received national recognition for innovative practices. She has served on many national committees and is a past board member for the Association for Persons in Supportive Employment, the Ohio Governor's Council on People with Disabilities, and the U.S. Business Leadership Network. Project SEARCH received the U.S. Department of Labor's 2004 New Freedom Initiative Award and was the inaugural recipient of the Dartmouth-Hitchcock's 2010 James W. Varnum National Quality Award. Eileen Lehner is a board member and the executive director of the New York Collaborates for Autism, or NYCA, which she co-founded in 2003. In 2005, she co-founded the NYCA Charter School, served as its first board president from 2005 to 2007, and continues to serve as a trustee. Eileen is a former attorney with nearly 20 years of experience specializing in labor and employment on behalf of management. During her partnership, she represented large and small employers ranging from multinational corporations to small family-owned businesses. Eileen has co-authored and edited several articles and publications on services for individuals with autism. Eileen and her husband, Stephen Cantor, reside in New York City with their 2 sons, one of whom has autism. Erin, are you ready to begin?
I am ready to begin, Ann.
Great.
Good morning. My name is Erin Riley, and I'm pleased to be here. Thanks, Ann, for the opportunity. What I'm going to be doing in the next half hour is really discussing the Project SEARCH model, not so much as it relates to autism, but the model itself. And then at the halfway point, I will turn that over to Eileen from the New York Collaboration for Autism, who will talk about their developing curriculum specifically to use with Project SEARCH for young adults who are on the autism spectrum. Project SEARCH started about 15 years ago here at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and it's based on the program philosophy by a quote by Stephen Simon, who said that people with disabilities have the right to choose a path toward education and employment. However, while freedom of choice is given, the right to work is earned, and earning the right to work is dependent upon the student's preparation. What we found here at Cincinnati Children's is that there were a lot of young people who wanted to work, but there were very few training opportunities that allowed them to gain the preparation they needed to do high turnover entry-level positions. And so because we were a training hospital, because we were very inclusive, we created a program with community partners that would allow young adults with significant disabilities to gain the preparation they needed. Our program is based on collaboration and shared resources. So for example, we currently have about 230 programs in the United States, and each one of them is based on and requires the same partnerships. There is a school partner for education, there's a DD partner for long-term follow-along, there's a supported employment agency, that provides the follow-along and the job coaching, and there's vocational rehab, and they help fund the job coaching. And then maybe most important, our program is a business-led model, and all these partners come together and work in a way in which they have not prior to the Project Search model on 1 year of intense work. Basically, Project Search is a 1-year school-to-work program for young people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Our goal is competitive employment. That's what we measure. We require total workplace immersion over the course of the year. The interns, students rotate through 3 internships over the year, which provide career exploration and job skill acquisition. And then we do customized job search assistance and follow-along. So again, because we work with a school, we essentially say to our school partner, instead of keeping these young adults for 18 to 21 in a standard school program where they focus on academics over and over again, why don't we move them in their final year to a business where they stay full-time and where they can learn appropriate business behaviors and skills that will help them achieve employment. So it's a 1 school year. We typically take 10 to 12 students with a wide variety of intellectual and developmental disabilities. I think it is important to note here that this year there are approximately 2,500 people, young adults with disabilities, enrolled in Project Search programs throughout the United States. 16% of those are young adults who are on the autism spectrum. So we do have a fairly large representation from young adults with autism or who are on the spectrum. The school provides a certified instructor, the agency provides job coaches, and those folks partner inside the business to teach the young people the skills they need. They are immersed in the host business culture. That means they're at the host the entire time. They go from home to the business, from the business home. During this entire school year, they should not be inside the school because we are really trying to challenge that notion that they're students and refocus them on working adults. They're going to rotate through unpaid internships with continual feedback. They are unpaid because these young people are still in high school. They are not performing a duty for the business. They are learning skills that are going to allow them to get employment. And the outcome of our program is employment. Again, we take folks who are 18 to 21 years old. They have to have finished their necessary high school credits because we do not teach subjects. It typically is their last year of high school eligibility or the year at which they decide they want to finish their high school eligibility. In order to be eligible for our program, they also have to be eligible for vocational rehab. They have to have appropriate hygiene, social, and communication skills. Now, that doesn't mean they have to talk or read and write. Most of our folks don't read or write very well, if at all. But they do have to be able to use an interpreter or an alphabet board or an iPad. So there has to be some way to communicate. They have to be able to take some basic direction, access public transportation. Because they're working in a business, they have to pass a drug screen, background check, and immunizations. And most of all, we are looking for folks who want to work. This is not a program that is useful when a parent enrolls someone who is not interested in working, or when the young person is interested in working, but the parent or family is absolutely dead set against it. Those young people shouldn't be put in our program. It's too resource intensive. You need to come into our program knowing that the outcome is employment. This is a look at our typical school year. Typically we start in the fall, we end sometime in the spring, early summer. There's an orientation to the business at the beginning of the program. As I mentioned before, there's 3 internships, each 10 to 12 weeks long. Between each internship, there's a transition week where we regroup, make sure we're headed in the right direction. that all of our partners think the resources are being spent appropriately, and that we're on track for employment. If there are employment planning meetings, 2 each internship over the course of the year, so 6, where we meet with the family, VR, all of the partners, and especially the young person. Make sure, again, that we're teaching skills that the young person's interested in, and that we're teaching skills that are robust enough to lead to employment. Over the course of the year, we also have a family involvement curriculum for our parents and carers, and we put together business advisory committees to help ensure that we get 100% employment. That is always our goal. And job search intensifies during the second internship, really starts ramping up in January. If you look at the day in the life of a Project Search student or internship, they typically start at 8 o'clock in the morning. They have an employability curriculum that focuses on social skills and what they need to know to be appropriate within a given business. So that curriculum changes depending on the business setting. For example, here at the hospital, we may focus on confidentiality, on hand washing, on the patient being first. In a bank, they may focus on counting skills and being quiet in the hall. So the curriculum changes based on the business setting. At about 9 o'clock, they go out to their internship sites. They stay out there until about 11:30, when we typically like them to eat lunch with their department for socialization. At 12:15, they go back to the internship site, and they come back to the classroom at 2 o'clock to debrief and review the day. One of the things we ask our business is to give us a classroom where our students can gather, and we typically have computers in the room, and we move on those. I just want to, this graph that looks at total workforce or workplace immersion. I think that I'm just going to mention 1 or 2 in particular, but it really points out the difference between typical high school special education and a project search model. And I think, one of the things you look at is, even if you look at performance, in high school, schools really reward effort, and they use alternative strategies to achieve success. In project search, we reward results because that's what employers reward. And so we're constantly looking for alternative ways to give employees the skills they need to perform the job. And that may not sound like much, but it's a huge difference. Even the dress code and discipline, major differences between what happens in high school and what happens in project search. And in a project search program, we have only one thing that we care about, that's employment, and I can't stress that enough. And the way in which we define employment is also important. And to a project search program, employment is competitive employment in an integrated setting. It cannot be an enclave, it cannot be a workshop. It needs to be year-round work. We are not okay with seasonal work. We typically look at 20 hours a week or more in terms of being an appropriate outcome, and we are focused on minimum wage or higher. Less than minimum wage or subsidized salaries are not acceptable in a project search program. Internships, I think the key thing I would say here in the essence of time is that it must teach marketable skills, and that means something that's necessary to a business. This can't be a program in which we have folks ripping pages out of a magazine or constantly stuffing envelopes for hours at a time, or cleaning things just for the sake of cleaning. Those are not marketable skills. They're not going to help them get a job. It is simply a waste of a person's time, disability or not. So we must be teaching marketable skills. I think one thing that Project Search does, and we're really proud of, is that we focus on not the easiest jobs, but jobs that are complex and systematic. And it just so happens that most every business in America has jobs that are complex and systematic, hard but routine. And they typically are the types of jobs that might be very good for a person with a disability. I want to go through a couple stories and just share some information. I'm going to start with the first slide. I do have permission to mention all of these folks' names and pertinent information. But the picture you see in the middle is a woman by the name of Jill Frammies. And Jill actually works in clinical sterilization. You know, Jill has Down syndrome. She has an IQ of less than 70. She's not a strong reader or writer. But over the course of the year, by breaking the skills down into internships, by creating tools, checklists, books with pictures, many, many things, we were able to teach Jill how to work in the clinical sterilization department and put together trays that are actually used in the operating room. Now, sometimes I hear people say to me, well, Jill must be, you know, a real exception with Down syndrome. Jill is not. I think what she is characteristic of is what anybody with a significant disability can do if you have a year in which to teach them complex skills. So Anne, if you would show the brief video, because I think it really sheds some light on the kind of folks that we work with.
Okay, will do.
Can you stay on?
Jill is excellent on trays.
Is the volume on?
She's very thorough.
Sure
She enjoys putting up trays. She's really focused when she does it. When you actually watch her put them up, you can see how focused she is. Some of her trays are 130, 150 instruments per tray, and she can put up probably 30 or 40 different trays.
This tray got 141 instruments.
So what we did was we have books that are set up with each tray, and it has each instrument on it and a picture of it. So she can pull the book off the shelf, flip through the pages, and actually match up exactly what she needs to put in. And after a couple of times, she usually has it memorized.
How many trays do you fill in a day?
Do my age, 32.
What does that mean? Next year you're going to have to fill more trays?
And next year I do 33. This is her tray. It's right front, second, third, fourth, and fifth.
The disabilities can present challenges for the employee and the supervisor, and Project SEARCH job coaches help supervisors address special issues and make adjustments.
We were finding that when she worked 8-hour days, it was too hard on her. The last hour would be she'd be very fatigued. She'd cry sometimes. But then after we switch it to 7 hours,
Are we back
she's
to
very
some sense of Project SEARCH. What I want to talk about, I mentioned that we have about 16% of our enrollment are folks who are on the autism spectrum. And these are a couple young men. This young man's name is Karis, and Karis is in our program in a Wegmans grocery store in Rochester, New York. Karis had no skills working in food preparation or working with the public. And what you see him doing here is learning how to cut lemons using gloves that are the cut-proof gloves. And he's practicing that in the classroom so that he can go out into the fish department. And this is the next slide. Karis never had in his school experience the opportunity to understand weights and measures. And so pounds and ounces really made no sense to him. And it wasn't until he was in an actual business setting where it was real that he started to grasp the importance and understand it. And this is just a really nice way of the tool the teacher did. She basically made fish out of paper, and then she filled in fish fillets and fish slices out of paper and filled them with beans. And she made scallops out of Play-Doh. And by using these tools, Karis learned how to weigh fish and fill a customer's order without wasting fish. He actually was offered a job in the fish department, which pays very, very well. At the end of his program, He opted instead to work in the pizza department in an open position in a Wegmans that was closer to his home. So Kerr is today working in a Wegmans close to his home full-time. This is a young man by the name of Eric, very severe autism when he started. It's very severe autism. When he started, he did not speak, and he now works in the emergency department where he stocks 51 rooms with all the equipment. Just real quickly, this is how we used to stock the diapers in the department, and for Eric, what we did was add drawer dividers that allowed him to know how many and what sizes, and it made all the difference. Not only that, but it saved the department money. I'm going to real quickly talk about this. There was recently a very large study that was done in Scotland that looked at the effectiveness of Project SEARCH, and what they found, they measured 2 years of the program, so 2 separate classes. Year 2 is yellow to orange. Year 1 is blue to purple. And they looked at from the carer's point of view, the family's point of view, and also the young person's point of view. And essentially, we saw major change. We saw major change in motivation and taking responsibility, self-care and living skills, social network and some relationships, confidence, emotional and mental health, meaningful use of time, and most importantly, employability. We didn't see huge change in money management, physical health, or community integration. Those are probably our 3 weakest areas. What that helps us know is what we need to do differently in Project SEARCH and how we need to partner after Project SEARCH with groups in the community. If you look at the client's star chart, it's exactly the same. It mirrors the same findings. So you see major changes in employability and motivation and confidence and in meaningful use of time. So real changes, and we're very proud of that. Another slide just from California. We looked in California in 2010 at everyone with a significant disability who was hired through supported employment, and then people who were hired who went through a Project SEARCH program. And we found that in California, in supported employment, the average wage was about $11. For Project SEARCH, it was about $17. When you looked at hours worked per week, for supported employment, it was about 23. For Project SEARCH, it was 30. Same thing here. We looked at the number of people who were hired who worked in food service. For supported employment, it was nearly 69%. For Project SEARCH, it was only 15%. And that's because we're looking for complex work that's routine, that pays a higher wage, and is more varied than just retail food service. If you look at benefits in California, supported employment, the folks who went through supported employment had about 63% benefits that were offered. Project SEARCH had 100%. Now that does not mean that everyone took the benefits. It means that in 100% of the jobs that our folks got, benefits were offered. This is my last slide. I just will say we currently have 209 sites throughout the United States, 30 additional sites that started this fall. We have programs in 39 states and numerous countries. We require an online database that folks have to enter their data. Every program is part of an independent model fidelity audit program, so we can ensure quality. We have an annual Project SEARCH conference and a really wide mix of rural, urban, large, and small district. Last thing I'll say, and I know this slide will be at the end, is that on July 15th, we published our first book on Project SEARCH. It's had great reviews from teachers, parents, business people, and it's available on Amazon.com. And all funds from that program, or from the book, are put directly back into the Project SEARCH program. At this time, I'd love to move forward and introduce you to Eileen Lehner, who's the Executive Director of New York Collaborates for Autism. Eileen is going to talk about how her group has partnered with us to create a curriculum that moves Project Search to the next level for young adults who are on the autism spectrum. Eileen?
Hello, this is Eileen Lehner. I would like to start by saying that we saw Project Search in 2010 and visited it a few sites throughout the country and were very impressed by the model. We decided that we wanted to enhance the model so that it would be able to be autism specific. And as we began to do this, we understood that it would be important to create a framework so that others who were seeking to use this program for people with autism would know what the steps are and would have a predetermined framework to use. The program components of the Project Search Collaborates for Autism program that we've created are exactly the same program components as the basic Project Search program. It's the same last year of high school transition to employment program. It's full immersion in the workforce. They use blended teachers and job coaches working together. The only distinction is that the program has been enhanced so that we use teaching strategies and supports that are tailored to the way that people with autism learn and can most succeed in the workforce. And so we use certain strategies and approaches that are more autism specific. Our eligibility is the same as Project Search. Our general timeline is the same that you heard Erin talk about. The daily schedule with regard to being in the training room in the beginning of the day and going out to work, lunchtime, working again, coming back to the training room for that download at the end of the day. We still follow that same basic program guideline. We enhance some of that time in the training room with, again, best practice autism-specific approaches to teaching and learning. So in effect, what we've done is we've used the Project Search structure and approach, and we've just put an autism lens on it. We are seeking to take autism-specific best practices for people to learn, and with that, we've created the autism framework that we'll be talking about. Now, in order to talk about an autism-specific framework, I think it's important to highlight certain aspects of what autism is. Autism is a group of complex disorders of brain development. Now, we all know there's no biological test. It's an observational-based diagnosis. But it's important to note here, because we're talking about employment, that autism is a lifelong disorder. And so for almost every person diagnosed with autism early in life, almost every single one will have autism throughout their adulthood. There are a few people with autism who may lose their diagnosis, but that is a very small number, so employment for people with autism is a big issue in our country, and it's something that we need to figure out how to do better, and I think Project Search, with some of these enhancements, is the best thing that I've seen out there to date. It's also important to note that autism is a highly variable disorder, and what that means and why it's important is that it's very different, it presents in a different way for each person with autism, so that for other disabilities, people may be more alike within that disability. In autism, they are quite different. They're disparate skills, they're disparate abilities and disabilities, and when we go on, we'll talk about what those are and why it's so important to note what those are within the same person. Now, we know that autism affects a person's development, but as with every person who has a developmental disability, often their opportunities in life are limited, and so that can cause their development to be limited, not just due to their disability, but to the opportunities. And so it's important in the program that we give people the opportunity to learn and be exposed to many of the things that they may not have been exposed to up until that date. And we believe that with the appropriate approach, they can learn how to navigate many of those expectations and many of those situations that they may not have been in before. During this talk, I'm going to refer to autism, or ASD. Many of you may know that the diagnostic code is changing later in 2013, and so things like Asperger's and autism and PDD-NOS are all going to be referred to as an autism spectrum disorder, and so that's the way I'll refer to it throughout this speech. People with autism have other conditions in addition to autism. Now, they may occur more frequently in autism than they do in the rest of the population, but it's important to note that autism may not be an individual's only challenge, and so we have to look at what other challenges they may have in addition to autism and take that into account in the learning approach and in the teaching style. Some of the more commonly occurring disorders are attention deficit, difficulties in motor coordination. Sleep is an issue. Most of you may think sleep isn't important, but if someone has a sleep disturbance and they can't get to work on time, that really does impact their ability to be employed. And so we deal with that, and we'll talk about how we deal with that in the program. Gastrointestinal disturbances, intellectual disabilities occur often with autism. Sensory challenges are an important area that we'll be talking about, and also seizures occur more often in people with autism than the general population. So how does autism manifest itself? Well, there are three basic areas of abnormal development that we see with individuals with autism, and they really come into play in the employment environment. The first is social interaction. Now, you'll see on your screen there's a picture of everyone standing around the water cooler talking and laughing, and hopefully we all know what those rules are, but sometimes they're very hard to read because it may have to do with experiences that we've had before, learning what joke is appropriate in what kind of environment, learning how much to disclose about your personal life and not. The rules of being a friend are very different than the rules of working in a workplace, and it's important for someone to understand that. We need to teach that in the program. Also, the social interaction can occur in many nonverbal ways. So, for example, you'll see the picture of the elevator. Everyone there is looking up at the number. When you walk into the elevator, there are so many rules of social interaction or non-interaction in an elevator. Often we walk into an elevator, we turn around and face the numbers, we push the button, and then we look up at the numbers as they change from floor to floor. It would be very unusual for someone you don't know in an elevator to start staring at what you're wearing. That would feel uncomfortable, and that's a rule of social interaction, or in that case non-interaction, that it's important for an individual to learn in the workplace. Because it's hard for people with autism to understand many of those social interactions, it's important that we teach them specifically and discreetly so they understand. Verbal and nonverbal communication is another area of abnormal development, and so some people with autism may not speak. Even if they do speak, they may not speak with the same intonation or tone. For those who do speak, they may not understand many of the nonverbal communication clues. So you'll see pictures of faces on your screen. And many of us can read what each of those faces is saying. Is someone angry? Are they happy? Are they thrilled? Are they surprised? You can read that on a person's face. If you have autism and your development in this nonverbal communication area is abnormal and you don't read that look, you may not understand when your supervisor is displeased with something. It's important that we learn to teach, or rather we teach people to read those clues. There's another picture there you'll see of someone in an elevator. We have an employee who was, or an intern rather, who was delivering boxes to various departments. These were supplies. They worked in the general supply room. And they didn't understand that the basic nonverbal cue when someone stands to the right outside an elevator is that they're waiting for people to exit the elevator. It's important that they learn what that nonverbal communication is so that when they're in a hospital or in a public place, people aren't walking out as they're pushing the cart in, or they're not standing there expecting to come out when they don't understand that that's what the cue is. So there are a lot of nonverbal cues that we get, nonverbal communication, that we need to be sure people understand, and that again has to be taught in a different way because people with autism may not read that as accurately as typically developing individuals. The last area that you'll see of abnormal development involves repetitive behaviors or severely restricted interests. It is not uncommon for people with autism to have an interest in a very deep interest in a particular area, or be fixated or become repetitive about something they do. Now, you can see that as a deficit. It can be monotonous. Someone who, I have an 18-year-old son, someone who talks about sports all the time. I don't find all that exciting, but some people do. Other people may find it an opportunity for a job. You'll see there a picture of Einstein. Einstein had areas of severely restricted interest, but he was an expert in his field. And so if we're looking at employment, it's important to think about someone's interest and then use that interest, use that strength to benefit them by finding a job that uses that interest. You'll also see a picture of a pricing gun, something that's used to price things in a store. I would find that job monotonous, not interesting. We have an individual with autism who works in a retail environment that has used that pricing gun and loves it, finds it quite reinforcing and enjoyable. That's using someone's area of interest or restricted behavior to their benefit, and it's important when we work with people to do that. Now, children with autism, and in the news these days we hear a lot about children with autism. Children with autism become adults with autism. And the behaviors that we expect from children are not appropriate for adults. So here you'll see a picture of a little boy who's peeing on a tree. That may be cute when you're 4 or 5 years old, but when you're 40 or 50, it's not cute, and it's something that can end someone up in trouble, either in the criminal justice system, in a job if they behave inappropriately. So we need to be sure that we maintain high expectations, the same kind of expectations that we have for typically developing folks. So how do we help our children with autism become happy, competent adults with autism? 3 basic areas that I think about. We promote independence, and we'll talk about how we do that. We maintain very high expectations, as high as possible for that individual, and we highlight someone's strengths, but we provide support to minimize or to scaffold around their deficits. It's important that we always achieve for the most that the individual can do. We've found that people have surprised us and exceeded our expectations, and I think you'll find the same. Now, the question might be asked, if we use so many of these program components of Project Search, why do we need an enhanced, or why is it useful to have an enhanced Project Search framework? What's different for people with autism? And so there are a couple of areas that I think we should focus on. The first is that people with autism, as I said earlier, one person with autism is different from another person with autism. There's a high degree of variability within the diagnosis, and there's a high degree of variability within an individual. So an individual with autism may have a hidden deficit or a hidden strength. And what I mean by that is someone who might have Down syndrome might cognitively be banded, meaning that all of their abilities are within a similar range. Yet a person with autism, their cognitive abilities in certain areas may be extremely high, and in other areas might be quite low. And we find this large degree of variability, and we call it splinter skills. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone with autism has a superior skill or is a savant, as we often hear in the news. That's just not accurate. But it does mean that there's much more variability within the individual, and we have to look for those areas of variability. Also, because the communication skills are so challenged often with an individual, and that doesn't mean speaking. Someone can have the ability to speak quite well, but not understand the purpose of language. So someone might understand French and Italian and be able to translate it, but not understand that using that sentence should be used for a social interaction with a back and forth. So when we look at someone's hidden strengths or hidden deficits in this area, and we understand that their communication skills may be abnormal, it's important to really probe and understand the depth of their abilities and try and maximize those. So here you'll see a picture of an individual who was initially assigned to work in the patient finance department. And originally it was believed that he did not have a great deal of abilities because his behaviors were a bit challenging and because his speech was difficult to understand and he was not a very good communicator. After some time in the patient finance department, he was then going to be reassigned, and we were thinking of putting him in the phlebotomy department, and because there was a good deal of paperwork. And we began to ask about what the jobs were in the phlebotomy department, and the supervisor there explained the basic skills. And we asked what someone would do after they completed those basic skills, and they began to tell us about information that was taken concerning when phlebotomists went out into various wards and how much time was there and how many blood draws were done and where things were delivered, and then mathematical computations were done and data was taken. The intern heard the explanation of the mathematical computation and in his head did the math rather, and in his head did the math and gave the answer. And we all discovered that he had strong ability with numbers, despite his communication and the outward appearance of numbers. And so as we got to know him better, we also understood that he had an incredible understanding of calendars. So if you gave him someone's date of birth and age, he could tell you what day of the week they were born on in any year. Now these skills really opened up the opportunity for job skills in the phlebotomy department. And he then went on to have a very successful internship where he was able to take lots of data, enter that data in machines, do the mathematical computations, and provide a lot of the information to the phlebotomy department that was needed. The importance of this example is understanding that this was a person who had a hidden strength, and it's important to be able to use that strength to his benefit. Now, people with autism also, one of the differences from others with general disabilities is they often have sensory sensitivities that are quite extreme. Someone may have a sensitivity where they seek out a particular sensory input, like they might like flickering light, or they may have a sensitivity where they're extremely sensitive to it and it may be difficult for them to handle that sensory input. So for example, noise may be something that absolutely causes the person to dissolve and be unable to handle the environment. So we have an individual in our program named Marco who is cognitively quite challenged, has limited verbal abilities, and finds noise to be overwhelming and upsetting. And he will literally shrink from a room. He will stand outside a doorway. We initially thought that he would be able to be in the cafeteria. It's a quieter environment, setting up. But even during the non-busy times in the cafeteria, people come in, they grab a cup of coffee, they clean the floors. Things happen that cause noise and that are unexpected. The environment was overstimulating for Marco, and so after the first 2 weeks in that rotation, we decided to take him out of the cafeteria and instead reassign him into the kitchen. Now, this is an institutional kitchen for a hospital setting, and so it's quieter. The work is known and planned out, so it's systematic, and there are teams of people. And one of the things that was surprising to us was that Marco responded so positively to the team, and we found that there were individuals who worked quite well with Marco that understood his sensitivity to sound. It's not a loud area anyway. And so they gave him a lot of reinforcement with smiles, nods, high fives, a pat on the back. Marco absolutely blossomed and is a very effective team member in the kitchen. Again, an example of matching the environment to the ability of the individual and to the sensory sensitivities. Another area where individuals with autism are a bit different is that they have difficulty generalizing skills. And so it's extremely important that we provide multiple opportunities across various environments in many different contexts to teach the same skill. Because a skill taught in one environment may not and is not likely to generalize into another. So the skill of following a schedule is something that we think is very important in a job. We all follow schedules of different sorts. It's important to teach that schedule in different environments. So what we've done is we've assigned tasks to individuals, interns, in morning emails. Now, in a school environment, it's not uncommon when a student comes in early that they wait until it's classroom time and they sit quietly until it's time to begin the class. We didn't think that's the way a job begins. If you come in early to a job, one of the first things that you do is you check your email. And so we are having our interns check their email in the morning, and each morning the job coach or teachers send them a small schedule of things that they can do before the training time begins. Once that training time begins, we also have separate written schedules for each individual because we have lots of separate workstations. Now you'll see in the middle picture, a picture of a classroom. And here you'll see that there are different time slots with things shown. Again, a different kind of schedule to follow, but again, important to generalize because an individual may face schedules in different parts of their life and they will not always look the same. Finally, you'll see a work schedule. And this was generated for an individual at one of the departments in the hospital and enables him to check off each area. Again, this is important to have a schedule here. Now, we've also worked with families, and we'll talk later about the family involvement portion of our program, but we also work with families about different schedules that might be effective for the interns at home in order to help them get ready for work in the beginning of the day and to be ready for bed in the evening. Schedules can work in lots of different environments, but it's important that the individual be able to follow them. Now, the Project Search Collaborate for Autism model emphasizes a teaching and work style that minimizes talking. The reason for that is, again, core deficit of autism is a communication disorder. So we use a very highly increased level of visual supports in the training process and on every job. And the view is that there should be visual supports to help the intern and eventually the worker so that on their worst day, they can fall back on and rely on the visual support. That means that any job site that you go to, you will likely see certain visual cues that would make the work organization very obvious. So you'll see here there are 4 boxes. Anyone coming in would know that the work goes from box 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. It's obvious. Similarly, with the filing system, you'll see different colors for different kinds of files. We make sure that we use certain visual schedules. Some of those schedules may be a visual task analysis. If someone doesn't read, we can use a picture system. I think you saw earlier for the young woman with Down syndrome, there was a picture system for her to put together the various equipment that was needed for the operating room. Very similar approach, but it's important to use for people with autism in all contexts so that on that day where the environment may become overstimulating for them and it's hard to process information, or where someone begins to talk to them and it's hard to focus as much on the job at hand, they can fall back on and rely on that visual support. The program has found that technology has been extremely useful. So instead of the traditional way of teaching in a classroom that we often see, our training time, we don't have a teacher standing up in front of the room teaching to a table full of interns. We typically individualize the teaching. We use a lot of computer-mediated learning. We put many supports on computer devices and on visuals. If you don't have a handheld device, that's okay. You can make a visual one on paper. But again, it's important to have that support. Now, the Project Search Collaborate for Autism components are borrowed from Project Search, but we use them a little differently. So here you'll see that in this autism-specific employment framework, that we have the same components. We have internships, we have mentoring, family involvement, the Business Advisory Council, and employment planning. I'm going to talk about a few of these components and how we use them to cross many of these different areas that I've spoken about before. One area that's very important for people with autism is the mentoring program. And it may not exist in every Project Search program, but we think it's very important to exist for people with autism. Because again, the core deficit of autism is also that social interaction. So there is social interaction with the other interns in the training room, the teacher and the job coach, and there are going to be social interactions with people you work with in each rotation. But it's nice to have an ongoing social connection with an employee in the workforce that will last throughout the entire 9 months of the program. And so what we do is we meet with the employees and we tell them about the Project Search program, and we explain that there is a mentoring program and that we're looking for volunteers, and we let them know that our expectation is that there will be at least 2 contacts a month with the mentor, and with the mentee rather, the intern, and that some of them will be initiated by the mentor, and some of them will be initiated by the intern. And we use this as an opportunity to generalize lots of skills. So some of the meetings between the mentor and the intern may be something simple like lunch or a cup of coffee. But we may use that relationship to generalize another skill, such as learning to send an email. We may use it learning to make an appropriate telephone call and leave a message. We also have group meetings where the mentors and our interns all get together. So for example, we've had a pre-Super Bowl party where all the mentors were invited to a Friday afternoon party before the Super Bowl. And it was great. Many of the employees came and they brought hats for the guys in the program and they talked about their favorite teams and there was food and there was a whole football conversation. This isn't specific to a job, but it is important to teach someone how to socialize appropriately in a job. And what we found last year, this year, is that many of our interns took those social skills that they learned in the mentoring program last year and that they were then able to generalize on the job. And they've continued to utilize them in the jobs that they've gotten in the outside world, as well as learning to now maintain relationships with other interns they met in the program. These same people were not able to make phone calls or send emails to make social plans before they entered the Project Search Collaborate for Autism program, but they are able to do that now. The other area that I'd like to highlight that we use quite a bit to support our program is the Business Advisory Council. The Business Advisory Council is generally thought of in 2 areas. One, to make sure that the learning is real for individuals who are in the Project Search program, and the second is to provide connections to the outside world so that we can open doors for job opportunities. We use the Business Advisory Council for a third reason. We use them in order to, again, generalize social skills, generalize communication skills, and to practice many of those initial skills that are required to search for, interview for, and obtain a job. And so that means that something as simple as how do you make a presentation in front of people? How do you get ready for a job interview? We practice that in the classroom. We do that with our mentors. Obviously, the job coaches and teachers are preparing them in advance. And then in the beginning of every Business Advisory Council meeting, we structure an activity that requires each of the mentors to come in, each of the interns to come in and to make a presentation or to practice an interview or to present their resume to the Business Advisory Council and then allow the council members to provide feedback. Sometimes the feedback is given to the teachers and job coaches if it has to do with the way resumes are structured. Sometimes they may be given just in the moment if someone is in the middle of an interview. We found this to be very effective, not only for the intern, but it's also very effective for those business leaders out there because they learn more about autism. They learn more to how to support our folks. The same idea of teaching the other person, not just the intern, but the other person in any social exchange, is used throughout the job. So whenever we're looking at these internships, we always make sure that we meet with the employer's representatives and we're teaching these individuals the same kind of strategies so that they can become better employers of individuals with all disabilities, but specifically in our program, autism. So the Project Search model. As I said before, it's been enhanced, and this was done together with New York Presbyterian Hospital's Center for Autism and the Developing Brain to help us create a framework that's based on best practice teaching. That framework has developed materials for the interns, strategies for the teachers and job coaches, as well as materials that the teachers and job coaches use in working with the interns, materials that are used on the job site, as well as strategies used with the employer's representatives, supervisors, and people with whom the interns interact. In addition, we've developed certain materials and strategies to help the mentors interact, as well as our Business Advisory Council. And each and every one of these is being used in a way that is specific to the way an individual with autism can most succeed. So that's really what the Project Search Collaborates for Autism model is about. It's the same concept as Project Search, just enhanced using best practice approaches for people with autism. So we're very excited about our program. In 2013, New York Collaborates for Autism will be selecting sites at which to disseminate this model, and we will be providing a grant to support those disseminations. So we hope that those of you who are interested will express your interest. It will be throughout the country, so things like geography will be important, but we do look forward to disseminating this model so that it can be more widely available. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eileen, and thank you, Erin, as well. Do you guys have anything else to add?
No, I don't think so. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I know that Eileen and I will be very pleased to take people's questions and get back to them. And we hope that folks find this worthwhile.
Yes, we're really excited about it.
Well, thank you again. It's been a pleasure hearing more about your innovative Project Search model and how NYCA has adapted it for people with ASD, and also how the model is constantly evolving to fit the needs of the interns. And like you said, we are interested in receiving everyone's questions for those who are participating today. So please email them to me at ann.williams@sedl.org. So that's Ann Williams at sedl.org. And I'll forward these questions to Erin and Eileen, and then I'll post them on our CEDL website. Also, I'd like to remind everyone to fill out the evaluation form, and I'll email the link to you. You'll need to fill out the evaluation to receive your 1 hour of CRCC CEU certificate. And finally, I'd like to thank NIDER that provided funding for this webcast. And once again, on behalf of our presenters and myself and the rest of the VR Autism staff here at CEDL, thank you and have a good day.